Welcome to this session on talent assessment digitization. My name is Martin Lanik. I serve as the CEO of Pinsight, a talent assessment company that is headquartered in Denver, Colorado. My background is in industrial organizational psychology. Before I get started with this session, I would like to say how honored I am to participate in this wonderful conference, and I thank the conference organizers for putting on this event. My session today is focused on talent assessment digitization. We will spend the next 60 minutes together, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions after that. My talk is organized around 3 key points. First, I will discuss the digitization process of talent assessment and some of the key themes and trends that are actually driving this digitization process. Then I'll give you an example of an actual digital assessment center. I will share with you some of the technology and some of the practical implications from our experience running virtual assessment centers around the world for the past 13 years. Last but not least, I will talk about the validity and the ROI of virtual assessment centers, just to give us some data and build a business case for the use of digital or virtual assessment centers. So let's get started. So why is the talent assessment field going through a process of digitalization? Very good question. Well, I think we don't need to search far. We can just look to last year, and we see that the world has shifted as a result of this global pandemic. We have seen that a large, exponentially larger number of employees are now working remotely and they are telecommuting. Look at this data here from McKinsey & Company. We see that in areas like information services, professional business services, even financial activities, or areas like manufacturing, education, and health services are seeing greater and greater percentage of full-time employees that are now telecommuting or working remotely. This trend is likely to stay with us. It is a trend that has started long before the pandemic, and the pandemic has only accelerated this process of digitalization, and it's likely that we're not going to return back. Employees have gotten used to and settled into their new work arrangements. They are much more comfortable perhaps now with remote work and balancing their work and life when it comes to remote work. And organizations have also gotten more comfortable with giving employees a bit more freedom to work from other places like their home, as opposed to requiring the work from an office. Again, my prediction and the prediction of various analysts from reputable sources and based on reputable data are predicting that these trends are going to stay, and it's very unlikely that we'll go back to the working arrangements that we have seen before the pandemic. Now, digital transformation has definitely touched our lives in the past year, but the key thing to remember is that this is not new. Digital transformation has actually been in full swing since 2019. Take a look at this data from Forbes. In 2019, 70% of organizations already had a digital transformation strategy in place. And most often, organizations were interested to improve operational efficiency through this digital transformation. They were using digital transformation as a way to meet the changing customer expectations, and they wanted to be faster to the market with new products, and that's what digital transformation was allowing them to do. So although it feels like we have experienced so much digital transformation in the past year, The process has started long ago. And by the time 2019 hit, it was already in full swing. And then the pandemic only accelerated this process. Now, let's turn our attention directly to assessment centers. Back in 2017, Mercer conducted their talent trend study and found that organizations were planning to use more virtual assessment centers already. Take a look. 43% of organizations were planning to start using virtual assessment centers in 2017, and 30% were already using virtual assessment centers back then. So that is 73% of organizations that were already either using or planning to start using virtual assessment centers in 2017. Now, fast forward to 2018, 1 year later, and we're finding now that already 66% of North American companies are using virtual day in the life assessment centers. Although we might see that virtual assessment centers sort of appeared and became much more popular last year because of the pandemic, again, this is a process that has started long time ago, and probably even more than a decade ago, and then it slowly started to accelerate as organizations were adopting virtual assessment centers. So let's put it all into perspective. And here's a nice little timeline of the evolution of assessment centers. The beginnings of assessment centers date back to World War II in the US. It was the Office of Strategic Services, that is now the CIA, that started to use this method to select espionage agents and high-level military officers. In 1950s, it was AT&T that was the first organization to implement assessment centers for managerial roles. And they used this methodology to assess talent and to really measure what makes an effective manager and help their managers to develop. Fast forward to 1990, and the method is growing in popularity with globalization and assessment centers around the world. Several large global consulting companies have built their business around offering assessment center facilities in different parts of the world where executives could actually travel to. They would go through a day, maybe 2 day long type of activity. And this activity would be used to either make a selection decision for promotion or hiring, or then aid in their development. We saw a lot of popularity of assessment centers around the world in the 1990s. Majority of assessment centers were still conducted face-to-face. So the participant had to actually travel to the facility. Assessors were physically present in the facility, and then they would exchange and they would engage in role plays, in group type of activities. Some of it maybe was recorded on a video. Perhaps there was some early experimentation with conducting some of the role plays over the telephone, but for the most part, the assessment center was actually conducted in person. 10 or 20 years later, in 2010, the method actually starts to move from in-person delivery to online format. So this means that the participant is no longer actually traveling to the assessment center. Rather, the assessment center is traveling to the participant through the internet. So we have released in 2010 our first version of a virtual assessment center, and there were others available, or other early forms of virtual assessment centers also available on the market. Now, 2018, the technology has actually advanced quite a bit, And the focus has really now been not on the delivery, but really on the analytics. So after assessors entering their ratings, advanced technology like algorithms and artificial intelligence has been implemented now to analyze the assessor ratings, combine the assessor ratings with different psychometrics, and then automatically generate different types of reports and analytics so that organizations can utilize this information to make their decisions, whether it be for hiring, promotion, identification of high potential employees, or succession planning, or whether it's used to create insight for the participant, him or herself, to aid in their development journey. So this slide here gives you a high level overview of the evolution of assessment centers and then the early digitalization process that started to happen in the 1990s as assessment centers were growing in popularity globally, and then the complete transformation from this very rich in-person experience to a very rich online experience that we see today. So to summarize, the first point I am trying to make here with my talk is that the digitalization of assessment centers has started long ago. This is not new. But the pandemic has really accelerated this process, and more importantly, it has accelerated the adoption of virtual assessment centers in their technology. Now I want to switch focus and give you an example of an actual digital assessment center. I'll share with you some screenshots and I'll share with you the technology and explain how technology has transformed the processes of assessment centers. When you think of the application of technology in assessment centers, it has the potential and it has streamlined and improved various different areas of the assessment center itself. We can talk, and first we'll talk about the administration. So the logistics, the operations of an assessment center. For those of you who have been running assessment centers in person, you know the complexity of operations that is involved in scheduling candidates, scheduling assessors, scheduling the rooms, for different exercises, making sure that each participant is in the right room for the right exercise with the right assessor can become a logistical challenge. Now, this is where technology can help quite a bit, and I'll show you the examples of how technology has streamlined various processes from scheduling to administration of exercises and then to the assessor scoring processes. Second portion where we have been investing a lot of energy is in the reporting and analytics. Assessment centers and the technology of assessment centers can really help to start integrating different sources of data. You know, that's really the benefit and the richness of assessment center is that you can see the candidate from various different perspectives. You have data from multiple assessors who have observed the candidate in different exercises. And you can then overlay that with different psychometrics like a personality test or cognitive ability test. And then together you can bring all these data points to build a bigger story and build insights. And it's really these insights that make assessment centers so valuable, not only for the participant who can use these insights to build his or her development plan and ensure a more successful development journey, but also for the organization, because these insights will help managers make better hiring, promotion, succession decisions about their direct reports. So that's going to be the second part. And then the third part is what I'm perhaps most excited about and our biggest innovation, and that is the post-assessment development. You have probably experienced this way too often, that candidates invest a whole day in the assessment center. Organizations spend significant amount of money to pay for the assessment center. Then the candidate gets the report, but no behavior change actually happens as a result of that assessment center. So we thought long and hard about how to make the assessment actually practical, or the assessment results practical, so that it's easier for participants to start immediately implementing some of the feedback and then changing their behavior, improving their leadership skills. And that's what I'll talk about next, is really how can you utilize technology for the development that happens outside or after the assessment center. So these are the three areas that I'll focus on, and I'll give you examples about. All right, so let's talk about first about the online administration. In our model of assessment centers, we base our model on the latest meta-analyses that are showing that it's really the combination of cognitive ability, personality, and assessor ratings of managerial competencies that is resulting in the highest possible accuracy. So that is based on the latest meta-analysis. When you measure these three things, you can achieve predictive validity up to 0.54. And this is really significant, because this means that the insights the assessment center produces are actually accurate. So then the decisions that management makes based on these insights are going to be good decisions that are going to lead the business to success. Keep in mind that this is our model of assessment centers. There are various different models of assessment centers. We use this particular model. Also, the benefit is that you can, when you are including assessor ratings of managerial competencies, you have different type of exercises that you can use. In our particular case, we use the day in the life type of model because it creates the most positive and engaging experience for participants. So this is a model where exercises are tied together, and the participant doesn't necessarily know when one exercise starts, the other one ends. Rather, the exercises are merged together to create a comprehensive simulation. So this is the assessment method that I will be talking about. Now, the virtual assessment center itself and the technology behind it has some of these key features. I mentioned that in virtual assessment centers, you have the option to do this sort of prepare, perform type of exercises that are not necessarily relevant. We have experimented with various approaches, and it seems that in the virtual setting, it's the 3-hour day in the life simulation that seems to have the best engagement of candidates. During the 3 hours, and by the way, we found that in a virtual environment, it's about 3-hour length is as much as a participant can take. The assessment center that lasts anything longer than 3 hours just gets a bit more painful, and it doesn't create that sort of experience as a 3-hour experience does. So during these 3 hours, candidates then can engage in various activities that you would normally see with assessment centers. You would have inbox type of activities, case studies, presentations, project plan, or live role plays. The live role plays are conducted via video conferencing system. And in our case, the video conferencing is directly implemented actually into the platform, so that neither the participant or the assessors have to leave the platform to go to a different system like Skype or Zoom to actually conduct the role play. And this is really important, again, in the administration and the efficiency of that assessment center. Before the assessment center, participants would get access to pre-work, so they get opportunity to practice with technology. And this is where they also complete psychometric tests, like a learning agility test, and then also a self-report personality survey. These are again embedded in the same assessment center platform, so the participant doesn't have to deal with multiple links to different vendors, but rather it's all in one system. The assessment center is, of course, because it's virtual, accessible from any PC. We offer 24/7 technical support. That is very important because the participants are in remote locations and technical issues do come up once in a while. So let's look at the different areas where the technology is actually guiding the processes. So first, the scheduling, and this is where a lot of the logistical nightmares can happen with an in-person assessment center. Um, this is perhaps the most complicated part of technology that we built because it kind of functions as an Uber for assessment centers. So on one hand, on one side, you have assessors that enter in their availability when they can run role plays. On the other side, you have the participants who are wanting to schedule their assessment center at various points in time. And now the system, based on the template of the assessment center, the system is matching assessors to participants to conduct the various role plays and score different portions of the assessment center. So this is a clear example where digitalization can help in the scheduling process, and it's going to help with a lot of the logistics. Now, as soon as the participant is scheduled, the technology automatically creates or sends pre-work documents to the participant. In our case, the participant completes a personality measure, they complete a learning agility test, and they get background information about their fictitious company where their simulation is taking place. Participants can schedule up to 48 hours before their simulation so that they have about 2 days to actually do the preparation, and it's not rushed, it's rather comfortable. So that's the pre-work. The next stage is then the virtual assessment center experience itself. And this is, again, the system manages this process completely and it's automated. So the system is sending reminders to participants. It's giving participants a countdown, letting them know how much time they have. It's automating delivery of the different documents, for instance, that are part of different exercises. It's giving them instructions, it's monitoring the participant's journey, so acting also as a administrator of the assessment center, letting participants know which exercise to do at what point in time. And then on the flip side, it's also managing your assessors. So this technology is letting your assessors know which participant to conduct which role play with, and then assigning scoring as well. So after the participant is then finished with the assessment center, the technology is going to manage the assessors and the scoring process. Each assessor is assigned different exercises to score, and then the technology sends reminders and ensures that the assessors are actually completing their scoring on time. In our case, the assessors have 22 hours after the assessment or after the end of the assessment center to actually complete their scores. That way, we can have the results ready for our clients 24 hours after the participant has completed the assessment center. Next big part of the assessment center technology is really the results or the analytics. Now, after the assessors complete their scores, the system analyzes these scores, compares them with or integrates them with the psychometrics, with the learning agility tests, and then it generates comprehensive analytics. Now, some of these analytics are going to look familiar. There's going to be a narrative type of PDF format with some graphs. Other analytics, especially the group analytics, are much more innovative, and I'll show you some examples of that. So this is where the data, because it sits now in the cloud rather than on paper, you can run different comparisons and you can see the bigger picture when you are comparing or looking at trends across multiple different candidates. After the results are generated and after the assessment center is completed, then there's time, of course, for development. And this is where an app that we've developed, I'll share with you, as a part of technology can help the participants to take the assessment result and then start their development journey right away. Here are some examples of simulation exercises that we have used with virtual assessment centers. You can see that these exercises are very standard and you probably are going to see them in your in-person assessment centers as well. So nothing new here. Very common types of exercises are a project plan where the participant is given some information about a project, industry trends, information about their team, and they're asked to put a project plan together. A coaching role play for usually an underperforming type of underperforming direct report where the participant has to give feedback and then coach the participant for improvement. There are team morale issues, so many case studies where there are some issues with employee engagement, morale, and the participant has to come up with a solution or resolution. Coworker conflict, delegation emails, boss interview, or angry customer. So these would all be traditional type of exercises. Now, some of them can be delivered as role plays. Others would be delivered as in a written format, either as emails or maybe presentations. I'm now going to share with you some screenshots of what the participant interface actually looks like. So imagine that you are sitting in front of your computer, you are going through this virtual assessment center that you have scheduled. You have logged into this website with your username and password, and now your assessment center begins. First, you have access to some background documents. So you can read background information that is going to be relevant to the case study or that's going to be relevant to a particular role play or project plan that you might be asked to do. So this is what it would look like. Now, in this case, the technology is protecting the ability of participants to print these documents. So that is not possible, but as they are reading through these documents, they can take notes on the right-hand side, and these notes are then available for them throughout that assessment center. You'll also notice that at the very bottom, there is tech support. And this is very important because participants often run into questions. So maybe they have hard time finding some piece of information. Maybe their electricity goes out, or maybe they lose internet, or whatever the reason is, their webcam isn't working. So we have a team that is immediately ready to resolve these issues. Since it's a timed exercise, to be fair to all the participants, the resolution of any of these tech issues is really critical and needs to be done right away. What you're looking at now is the dashboard for the assessment center. So this is how the whole assessment center is structured. So imagine that you have a 3-hour exercise or activity here that is divided into various exercises. And these exercises are arriving in the form of emails that are automatically coming into your inbox at various points in time. So you might start with a couple emails that give you some basic instructions, maybe let you know about the first role play, and then you would also have information on your calendar where you can see the different interactions that you have. So in this particular case, you might have one role play at 5 p.m. with Avery Mills. You also see a list of contacts. So these are your fictitious coworkers inside and outside of the organization. And as a participant through this assessment center, you can reach out to any one of these contacts either with an email, or you can actually call them. So you can press this call button. They're not going to pick up, but you can leave a voicemail. This is also, added feature so that we can be collecting that participant behavior in not only written form, but also through video and verbally. You'll also see on the top right corner here that the participant has a timer, and then depending on how much time is left for the assessment center, that is displayed here. Here's another example of a document. So now let's say that you're going into a role play. So first you would get an email, a reminder that your role play is going to start in the next 15 minutes, prompting you to actually review the background information. And in this case, let's just say that the background information is a performance appraisal for an underperforming employee that I'm asked to coach. So I would get that email reminder that this exercise is coming up. I would go to my files folder. Here I would actually access the performance appraisal for Avery Mills. This is the basis for my exercise here. And I might have some additional information here. And then 15 minutes later, Avery actually calls me. Through the platform, I pick up, and then I end up in a live video role play with Avery Mills. Of course, here now the role player is following a script based on the particular role play, is asking questions, delivering different prompts as would be normal in an assessment center that is conducted in person. The benefit here is that the assessor can now fully focus on role playing because the technology is automatically going to record this session so that later the participant or the assessor can actually go in, watch this recording, and then enter in their ratings. I wanted to show you one more screen that I skipped, and that is this email functionality. So as participants are working in this fictitious company for the duration of 3 hours, they're receiving emails either from their boss, from their direct reports, from their coworkers and colleagues inside and outside of the organization. Again, that all depends on the scenario and the different exercises that you're using. As those emails arrive at different points in time, then participants can respond to them. And this works just like any email where you can type in, you hit reply, you type in your message. However, the technology is now also saving this information periodically. So it's every so often the information that you're typing in is being saved. So that later the assessors can go in and they can look at drafts, perhaps, as you were changing your mind of how to reply and what to reply with to a particular exercise. So we can get closer into some of the cognitive processes of the participants as well. All right, so that is, those are some examples of how technology has helped with the logistics of the assessment center, so the administration itself. Now I will change focus to talk about the online reporting, and this is where the technology is used to analyze the information from assessors, the ratings that assessors entered for the various exercises, and then integrate that information with psychometrics to generate reports. There are many different options here when it comes to the technology. So because you have ratings from assessors and you have the psychometrics, you can look at various models to actually be integrating this data. In our case, we have experimented with various different models, and the views and the analytics that seems to be most popular with clients are just an overall readiness, 9-box, that is often used in selection or promotion, succession planning decisions, and then some of the more traditional type of reports on personality or competencies. The beauty of having all the data stored in the cloud is that in addition to the traditional PDF report that is for a particular participant, you can now have um, you can now have various views that are comparing participants. So you can have maybe a look at a particular department, or you can have a look at a different team to better understand and gather some of those insights. So I'm now going to give you some of these or examples of some of these different analytics. Here is a readiness analytic. So this is the highest level of analysis where we are combining all the different data points to make a final recommendation. Is this person ready now? Do they need 3 to 6 months of development, 7 to 12 months of development, or more than a year? This information is then used by organizations to identify the best candidates and to make the best selection decisions, whether it's in hiring or in promotion type of situations. A different type of graph here is the 9-box. And this has become very popular with HR departments and talent management, especially because it splits the participants' current performance from their future potential. And this is really critical as you are engaged in workforce planning type of initiatives. So understanding who your high potentials are and understanding who your successors are for key positions is really critical as you are preparing the organization for the future. So in this graph here, we are showing the assessor ratings. So that is the performance. That is how the participant has been observed to perform in the simulation. And then we are comparing that with potential, and that is the prediction of their future potential that is based on the psychometrics. So this would be the personality and the cognitive ability. You can now also start grouping the competencies under different labels or categories, such as business strategies. So we know, for instance, that it takes different type of competencies to excel in customer service than to build strategic alliances with suppliers and vendors. And knowing what competencies to group under the customer satisfaction versus building alliances with partners then enables you to calculate to predict how well a person is going to be functioning in these different areas, or as you compare them to the different business strategies that they will be expected to execute against. Now, moving on to some of the individual type of analytics. So this is what you would see also in the PDF report. For instance, of course, there would be feedback on the different competencies. And so here you can see the various competencies that were measured in the assessment center and the scores that participants received. In our case, you'll notice that the scores range from 0 to 100. And since we are storing all the data in the cloud and have conducted multiple analyses of this data, it is possible now to start drawing comparisons. So we have built this global database of leaders from around the world. And as a new participant goes through the assessment center, we can compare his or her performance against this global norm group. And that gives us the opportunity then to provide information in the form of a percentile score. so you can better understand how this person is performing compared to other leaders at this level. Of course, since we have collected personality information, we are also able to provide feedback on these different personality traits. And here is an example of what an automated result would be from a personality survey. Another view here would be the cognitive ability or the learning agility that was measured, and that is also feeding under this calculation of potential. So here's an example of another page that gives you a bit of an insight into the potential of this candidate. Very interesting and powerful view for participants, especially when it comes to their development, is the skills and motivation graph. And what it does, it aligns the observed competency scores from the assessment center with psychometrics. So the psychometrics predict how naturally this particular skill comes to the participant with their personality profile, and they can guide the participant to make better, more accurate or more powerful development decisions for themselves. For example, a participant that scores that scores lower on this competency number 13, let's just say that is strategic thinking. So that competency is actually not coming to the participant as naturally as competency number 6, which might be active listening, for instance. So it's going to be much easier for the participant to start working on active listening, in this case, competency number 6, because they'll see it'll come more naturally to them, it's going to be more enjoyable, and they're more likely to see success in their development. Here you can see some of the more traditional feedback from assessment center that you might be more familiar with or used to. This is where the assessor ratings are communicated back to the participant. So the competency is then broken down into different actions that the participant did, and you can see the different exercises where those actions were also observed. For instance, brainstorming multiple solutions to a problem was consistently performed in 2 different exercises in a presentation and an exercise we're calling business opportunities, where the participant has to analyze and make decisions about various business opportunities, whether to pursue them or not. We see a different picture now here, more inconsistency in performance when it comes to identifying the advantages and disadvantages of a solution. So here the participant showed stronger behavior in the business opportunities exercise and weaker behavior in the presentation exercise. This type of feedback is very powerful for participants because now they know exactly what behaviors they did in which exercises that resulted in the competency scores that they actually received. Now I'm going to switch focus to online development. And after the assessment center has actually been completed, technology can help translate that assessment center, those assessment center results into an immediate development plan. And that is what the Pinsight app actually does. So after a participant completes the assessment center, the app automatically reads the result and generates a tailor-made, custom-made development plan for that particular participant. And as the participant then goes through their development journey, every day the app is going to send a reminder to practice a particular exercise. This app is based on the notion that leadership skills should be built as habits. So you pick a particular competency area that you want to work on. The app suggests the best order. You can change that if you want to. But the most important thing here is that the app is going to give you an exercise that you can practice. And these are simple 5-minute exercises that you can do on the job directly. And through the repetition, so through practicing that particular exercise over and over and over again, this is how you build habits. And that's what the app is actually helping you to do. As you are practicing using this app, as you are completing your simple 5-minute exercises, the app is sending information back to the cloud again, and your analytics are being updated. So your assessment center results, your report is being updated in real time as you continue your practice. So you can see that this participant right here has been working on developing their ability to make good decisions. They started with this darker green color right here. Let's just say that that was 55th percentile, so they were better than 55% of people in our norm group. And through development, you can see that they have been able to grow this score, and now their estimated score is closer to 70. So they have certainly improved. All right, so I hope that these are some great examples that I shared with you about how technology has changed the practice of assessment centers and the various applications of technology, from the logistics and operations of assessment centers to the analytics, integration of the data generating of reports, all the way to the development that happens after the assessment center. Now, I want to switch focus to the third portion of my talk today, and that is to share with you some data on the validity and the return on investment of virtual assessment centers. I mentioned this before earlier in my talk that our assessment centers measure three things. So we measure cognitive ability, personality, and then competencies through a simulation. And the reason we do that is that several meta-analyses have pointed out that by combining these three factors, you can predict success at work better than any one of these factors alone. In fact, the predictive validity of assessment centers that combine cognitive ability with personality and simulation is as good as the relationship between smoking and lung cancer. So it's a pretty significant and pretty high correlation. Now, why care about these correlation coefficients? Where they help in our decision making. No decision is ever certain, and that's certainly true when we're dealing with people. But we can increase the odds of making a good hiring or promotion decision, and we can do that by using data. We can use data that the assessment center provides to us. Let's just walk through an example. So let's say that you are making a hiring decision, and you are deciding whether you should hire a particular candidate. Now, you could, of course, flip a coin. You will have 50-50% chance that the candidate is going to succeed or that the candidate is going to fail. But you can ask the candidate's previous manager, and you could make your decision based on the manager's recommendation. Based on our research, we show that you're actually worse off relying on the manager's evaluation in making your hiring decision because there is a very slight negative correlation. What that means is that now your chance of success has slightly decreased to 46%, and your chance that the candidate is going to fail has slightly increased to 54%. Now, let's say that you decide to administer a cognitive ability test, an intelligence test, and you are going to base your decision on that. We know from research that there's a strong positive correlation between intelligence and performance on the job. So you are likely to increase your odds of a good decision. Based on this data and based on this correlation coefficient, the chance that your candidate is going to succeed has now increased to 60%, and a chance of failure has decreased to 40%. Now take a look what would happen if you actually base your decision on the assessment center. The assessment center that combines cognitive ability, personality, and assessor ratings, observations, and a simulation has the highest possible chance of success out of all different assessment methodologies. In fact, if you base your decision on an assessment center, the odds of making a good decision, so the odds that your candidate is actually going to succeed, it has increased to 68%, and the chance of the candidate failing has decreased to 32%. So this is why validity is so important, because it tells us the odds of making a good versus a poor decision as we are contemplating whether to hire somebody, promote somebody, or identify them as a high potential employee. Now, there's a lot of meta-analysis that have been conducted over the years on assessment centers. So we know that they work. Majority, if not all of these meta-analyses rely on in-person assessment center research. So of course, the question is, well, how do these results translate to virtual assessment centers? I am sharing with you some validity coefficients that we have collected over the years, and you can see that our digital assessment center has been shown to predict performance evaluations. So those who perform well on the assessment center receive higher performance evaluations. They advance faster in their career, so they move faster to higher levels of management. They show more engagement with their job. They intend to stay in the role and with the organization longer. Their direct reports, so their team members that they supervise, are more engaged, and they are more likely to retain their direct reports. So people who do well in the assessment center actually show higher retention rates of their direct reports. Now, you can see that these validity coefficients are going to be very similar to what has been seen in the meta-analyses in the research literature with in-person assessment centers. Now, let's put that into practice. So what does this really mean? So here's an example of how the assessment center can actually predict turnover intentions. So you can see here 3 columns. So we have data from people who do poorly on the assessment center, participants who receive medium scores, and then participants who receive high scores. You can also see the color here representing the percentage of these participants that are intending to stay in their role, intending to leave, or that are neutral. What should strike you right away is that 89% of the participants who perform well in the assessment center also intend to stay in their role. 56% of the medium performers intend to stay in their role, and only 45, so less than 50% of low performers intend to stay in their role. So there is a clear link here between turnover intentions and performance in the assessment center. Now, we can take this research on turnover intentions and we can actually put that into an ROI calculation. And I'll walk you through that. So this calculation will then help us determine or help us estimate the return on investment of utilizing a virtual assessment center. We know from previous research that the cost of replacing a single employee ranges from half of their annual salary to 2 times their annual salary. And what goes into these costs are, of course, search costs, time to productivity, and so forth. So it's a range. It can be from half of their salary to 2 times their salary. Because our assessment centers are used for leadership positions, we have looked up the average national salary for a leader, and that is $123,000 per year. So the cost of replacing a single leader ranges anywhere from 61,500 to 246,000 on the higher end. Now, in our sample, we had roughly 150 participants. And if from the previous graph, you can see that if 13 fewer participants would actually leave the organization, and that's what would achieve, that's what we would be able to achieve by only selecting the high performance. So if all of, so if we only selected high performing participants on the assessment center, actually 13 fewer participants would leave. And we can now multiply the cost of replacing these 13 participants. So on the lower end, that is roughly $800,000. On the higher end, that's that's over $3 million. So this puts it into perspective of the return of investment of a virtual assessment center, because it helps you to select participants that are more likely to stay in the organization. We can now calculate what are the savings by not having to replace these roles, because we are using the assessment center to select participants that are much more likely to stay in the role and in the organization. So this was my talk, and I hope that you enjoyed the past 60 minutes that we spent together. I want to thank you for your attention here. Some concluding thoughts to summarize. So assessment centers started the process of digital transformation long before the pandemic. We see that this was happening in the 2017-18, started about a decade before, and the pandemic only accelerated it. It is very unlikely that we will go back to running in-person assessment centers at the scale that we were running before. But there are new opportunities here now on the market, because online assessment centers scale easier, they're less expensive, and so we might see that there is a bit of a renaissance of the assessment center method in its virtual format. As I mentioned, technology can streamline many assessment center processes, and it can create a similarly rich experience for participants. The various areas that technology can help with are not only the logistics with participant management, assessor management, but also in the analytics. So in generating reports, generating various views, creating deeper insights as you compare multiple different participants, but also in the development that happens after the assessment center through the application of a phone app. And last but not least, digital assessment centers also show high levels of validity, and they can improve the quality of talent decisions at a friendly cost that is going to result in high levels of ROI for organizations. I hope that you enjoyed this talk, and this talk was pre-recorded so that we can limit any technology issues during the day of the conference. However, I will be available for about 15 minutes to take your questions at the end of this talk, and we'll be able to do this live. I want to also direct your attention to pinside.com if you'd like to learn more about the virtual assessment centers that I shared with you. There are various resources and blogs for you to read and study up. We're happy to share our experience with building this virtual assessment center platform and technology for the past 13 years and running virtual assessment centers globally. Do not hesitate to reach out. You can find us at pinside.com. Thank you again, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer portion of our session.